Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 34, and today I'm here with my friend Lucy Aitkenread talking about creating community. Lucy is the founder of Parent Allies, a place that resources parents to be allies to their children, and she lives off the grid in New Zealand with her family, where she creates videos and writes, facilitates retreats and workshops about how we can live compassionately with our families, communities, ourselves, and the earth. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. Shout out to our new patron, Rafida Razak. Thank you for aligning your money with your values and joining the Sage Family Patreon community, where on the first of every month, I do a live video Q&A. It's like mini coaching exclusively for Patreon supporters. And you all are welcome to join in the party by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/sagefamily. You can also help out this podcast by leaving an iTunes review like Clamama5, who says, "Thanks for being awesome. Of all the podcasts I listen to, this one is my favorite. As a therapist and a mom, I connect to and learn from every single episode. Rachel oozes compassionate curiosity and is compelling to listen to." My husband listens also, and this podcast has inspired hours and hours of conversation between us and has influenced our parenting and lifestyle choices. I recommend this podcast to anyone I can. Clamama5, thank you. Compassionate curiosity, I love that. And if you all have some feedback you want to leave for the podcast, just head on over to iTunes and let everybody know what you think. Our adventure of the week this episode was a date night of sorts when my husband and I went out to see a screening of the new Playing with Fire documentary downtown. After reading Scott's Playing with Fire book, a narrative-style story that chronicled his family's pivot toward financial independence, I reached out to him and told him that we were already friends and he just didn't know it yet. And rather than filing a restraining order, he was warm, funny, and helpful. So when he announced a screening of his film by the same name, complete with a panel after the film that included Vicki Robin, J.D. Roth, and Scott and his wife Taylor, I snatched up my tickets. My husband and I both thoroughly enjoyed our evening of burritos, financial independence inspiration, and fangirling. I was sitting right behind Vicki Robin.
We're so fixated on the material part of it that we think this whole journey is about investing in VTSAX. You know, like that is the ultimate goal. So here's the ladder of financial independence that I talk about. The first level of financial independence, and if you only do this, you are ahead of everybody else in this society, is liberating your mind from the thrall of the consumer culture. The capacity.
If you want to see photos and videos of this adventure, then head on over to Sage Parenting on Instagram and follow along. Today, Lucy Aitkenread is joining me to share a conversation on creating community. I found Lucy's YouTube channel, Lulastic and the Hippie Shake, years ago, and to this day, it's one of the only YouTube channels I'm actually subscribed to. She shares her warm energy, natural perspective, and anthem of sisterhood through the context of her family's off-grid, unschooling life together in a yurt in New Zealand. She is a beautiful person inside and out. Lucy, thank you for filling my cup from afar.
That's my pleasure.
Now tell us your story, Lucy. Who are you? What are you passionate about? What about your relationships and life fulfill you? And what is your relationship with this topic of community?
Wow, okay. That's a big first question, but I'm going to just launch into it.
It is. We go deep here.
Who
We dive
am
deep real
I?
quick.
It's like the great existential question of life. So I'm Lucy, and it occurred to me recently that I quite like labels, because on my handles, like on my Instagram and Twitter, I say I'm Lucy, I'm a mother, activist, and writer. And so clearly I'm kind of into aligning myself with these labels, because I also define myself as an unschooler or a life learner, and as an earth lover. I feel like using simple words to get across the things that are really important to me, they kind of like, they're sort of cues to other people. They can say, oh, well, I'm an activist, or, oh, I have feminist in there as well. So feminist, activist, mother, unschooler, I don't know. I'm one of the rare alternative types that actually really enjoys the use of labels. So, yeah, I am all those things. I'm super passionate about a lot of different things. I recently heard the label multi-passionate entrepreneur, and I was like, yep, I'll take that one as well.
Yes, and I will say I love labels. My only hesitation as like a child rights advocate type person is that they be consent based. So I love labels.
Yeah.
I think they can be amazing and helpful and wonderful, so long as the person who is owning the label is the one who actually chooses whether or not it's a fit.
Isn't that exactly right? We should define it. We should say, we love self-appointed labels.
Yeah. Yes,
That's my jam. So I guess basically I've just gone through life applying different labels to myself, and those are the ones that I'm left with now as I'm 36 years old. And yeah, like you say, I live in a yurt, and I have 2 children, Ramona and Juno, that we share our life with. And I've been married to my husband Tim for jeepers, like 14 years now, so a really long time.
Nice.
But we also share our farm with another little family. So we're kind of doing a sort of a small version of an intentional community. So we're learning a lot about community in that area. But I'm also a big believer in building community in any way possible. So I try and be a part of the unschooling community here in New Zealand. We've got a really strong network. And I really see that, even though people come from across New Zealand, Aotearoa, to camps and gatherings, we're not local to each other, but we try really hard to build really in-depth community for the sake of our children and for the well-being of the other adults around. And I'm also super enthusiastic about things called moon circles, which are these small gatherings of women, which are doing the same thing, just building really strong bonds with each other. I think that I've become really passionate about community, basically perhaps as a result of my upbringing, because I was brought up in the church. My parents, my grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents are all ministers of the church.
Oh, wow.
And so I know I was raised in quite an evangelical, traditional way, and really remained, despite like a few rebel years when I was a teenager, kind of remained in that faith for a really long time. And then as I began unschooling, I began deconstructing all sorts of parts of my life, like just asking really big questions of things, like, what's the truth in this? Where has this gone wrong? And where is the dogma here? Is this institution helpful? And basically, as I began asking those questions, there became some really apparent things that I was so uncomfortable with, that I didn't want to put the mental labor into becoming comfortable with them, as I had done for most of my adult life. So things like misogyny in the church and homophobia and things like that. I basically said, you know what, this is an institution that I don't really want to align myself with that much anymore. So in the last few years, I have been practicing spirituality without an institution, and it's made me really keen on developing these other forms of community wherever I can. So with the women in neighborhood with the children and adults of our unschooling network here on our own little farm. Yeah, so I guess that's the background to why I'm super keen on community and what it can do for who we are as humans.
I'm so grateful that you provided that context. I have had that conversation too with a lot of people as someone who was raised within religion and then evolved out of it as I got older. You know, a lot of people talk about that community piece being so central for them, even though a lot of the tenets of the, you know, of the structure of the religion and the rules and the don't really resonate with them. And so it's nice to be able to show people that there's another path to get that community piece of like people coming together around shared values outside of organized religion.
Yeah.
I also think that you brought up something super fun and that we need to invite the listeners to figure out what their intentionally chosen labels should be.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I mean, you and I have a website, so we write our little bios, but I feel like really everybody could benefit from that. And it would be really helpful in their value setting and their priority setting, figuring out what those words are that kind of define where they direct their energy and who they are.
Yeah, although people really dislike labels. I'm really coming to understand. I read a really great article that somebody sent me recently about how unschooling is a feminist act. It was really great. But yes, she spent the first half of it talking about how both of those labels are not ones that she's very keen on, like both unschooling and feminism. I was like, oh, I love those labels. I was like, basically, the moment I saw the article heading, I was like, you're my kind of woman.
Exactly. That they can be helpful.
I do find them really helpful, but I guess, even within feminism, there's so many different kinds of feminists, and also maybe they're polarizing. Maybe that's why people don't find them helpful. It's like, if you say you're a feminist, because of the world that we live in, you might shut down some people's hearts and minds towards you, because they might think that you're this kind of person, or do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know. It's a very, very fascinating topic, I think.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think a lot of us, like myself included, had so much baggage from growing up in that mainstream parenting paradigm and in traditional public school systems where labels were put on us without our consent. We had no say over them, no, say in them, and they just had to be adopted by us as part of our identities, and then everyone around us boxed us in based on those labels we received. So I think a lot of people have so much baggage around labels, but and so I think a part of a lot of people's evolution is to step away from them for a while. But I have found that there is a lot of value in shifting my relationship to labels and finding the value in them and then applying them in ways that are helpful to me and to my kids.
Yeah. Well, people often say to me, how do I find my tribe? How do I find my people? And I often will say back, you need to get on Google or Facebook and you need to type in some labels.
Yes.
Because that is how you can find your people. Like, you might hate the term attachment parenting, but if you type in attachment parenting into Facebook, you're so likely to find groups and perhaps groups that are local to you who basically love breastfeeding, who love to respect their children. You're actually going to find people who probably share some of the values that you have. So it's a funny thing. And in that way, I think they can be really useful in this age where, we do have to very actively and intentionally look for our people out there.
Yes.
And I think labels can really be a tool in allowing us to do that. Even within attachment parenting groups, I've had friends who are like, oh, I hate the word attachment parenting. I hate that term. And I'm like, you're literally sitting at an attachment parenting club.
Yeah, I mean, those
they are useful.
Using them, thinking of them, okay, so you don't like labels. What about search terms? If we change the name to search terms, will that be more helpful? Will that get under your defensiveness?
That is a great idea. That's like maybe labels for millennials. Just search them.
Labels for millennials. That is so a blog post. Yes. Oh my God, I love that. Yes, and it's so true. And like in my coaching with families too, like if your kid has a unique way of being that your child is experiencing a lot of challenges around, like trying to find a way to engage in labels in a way that is helpful. Like it can connect you with resources. It can connect you with other families who are sharing the same challenges. It can, so they can be helpful. I think the piece that they need is that consent piece. Like I wouldn't put a label on a child without their consent and without them knowing they're welcome to try it on and see how it feels. And if it fits, we can lean into it more. Or if it doesn't, they can set it down. And also being mindful not to pathologize normal, healthy ways of being, which often comes out of a misalignment between the natural child and mainstream systems. It often looks like inappropriate expectations. So on the one hand, if your child is not meeting inappropriate expectations, it doesn't mean there is something, quote, wrong with your child. On the other hand, if picking up a label brings you a new level of understanding, resources, and community that resonate with your unique way of being, then own it.
Yeah. And also maybe, seeing as we're coming up with all sorts of different terms at the moment, maybe boxless labels. So labels that can be helpful but don't necessarily put you in a box. I recently did a video about labels and getting diagnosis for our kids because I'd noticed that within the unschooling community, there were loads and loads of kids who were neurodiverse, but there was a really strong trend to rejecting neurodiverse labels.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically just asking the question, how helpful is that for our children? Is that just some baggage that adults are bringing in, not wanting to label? Is it actually stopping kids from getting support that they might need? And, at that stage, I was very open-minded. I was kind of just posing the question. But it became really apparent in the comments that the only people who, there was loads of comments. And basically, it was from adults and adults of children who had found getting a diagnosis and the label that came up really, really helpful for their children in providing them with a vocabulary and resources that were specific to what their child was experiencing. And because that community around Lulastic does tend to be filled with respectful parents, none of them were kind of saying this defines my child and my child is ADHD and that's the box they're in and they're going to be limited by it, but rather it gave them access to all the stuff that was incredibly helpful for their family. So I think there's this idea that we can hold something in our hands with our fingers kind of open so that the really good stuff can sit in the palm of our hand and then all the unhelpful stuff can just sift through our fingers. I hold I hold that image in my head quite a lot with all sorts of things, but particularly this one around diagnosis and labels. Like we can take the really good stuff from that and then just let the really unhelpful stuff sift through our fingers. And as the parents, we're the ones that bring the intention. So if our intention with going down the route of diagnosis or labels is in order to get more support and vocabulary and find out people, let's go for it. And if our intention is actually, something else, then we really need to just examine that a little bit more and just hold on to it for a while before we progress anything. But it was very strongly lent towards one way, towards it being helpful to celebrate neurodivergence by, having different diagnoses and labels, it seemed to be, which was very fascinating.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk to you for like a solid 24 hours.
Yeah, maybe 1,000 years. I thought you were going to say 1,000 years, and I was thinking, and then you went down to 24 hours, and I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, definitely 1,000 years. Well. Can I move on to your property? That's really the question that I'm making my way to. Okay, so what is this thing, community, that we're talking about? What does community actually look like?
Okay. Yeah, so wow, like most things, community is a spectrum. I would say that everybody has some form of community, right? Because even in our families, that's like a sort of micro version of community. And then you have, our great big neighborhoods, which used to be a much stronger community because our world for much of history was we were in tribes, and then many generations passed, and the church kind of got its hold on much of Western world, and then we became kind of parishes. So we would then be gathered around a church, and there would be strong community around the kind of parish. And now we're kind of post church, so we don't have parishes, but we still have sort of physical communities. But they don't have, they kind of function around different things now. They kind of function around maybe the shops, because that's the patriarchal, capitalist, consumerist system that we live in now. But still, we would say, I guess everybody would say that they have a wider community in their neighborhood, perhaps. And in some places, perhaps people still bring meals to people that are ill or have just had a baby. But it's quite rare, right? So every person will have different expressions of community around them. So their micro community, their family, and then maybe their wider kind of neighborhood, which might feel much less intentional. And I guess I'm advocating to really strengthen those communities. So for people to peer out on their lives and say, where can I really build community that is really meaningful, where we can walk together through the hard times and the joyful times. There's a quote from Charles Eisenstein who says that we are designed for more intimacy than anyone thinks is normal. And because we don't get it, we fill that with mindless consumption,
Yes.
TV, media, things that are kind of bottomless or don't really completely fill us up at all, because they're not really meeting that human need for intimacy. So, and I reckon that community is basically where all of that stuff happens, where we can be vulnerable with each other, where we can tell our stories, where we can experience some of those things that have been fundamental to human well-being for generations that we don't have now. So things like dancing together, singing together, cooking together, and sharing meals.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And I love that you've touched on like why community is important too and some of the benefits of it. Like how we evolved in the early days of humanity to exist in those tribes, and we have, historically evolved away from that, except our cells don't know that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's like inside our hearts, we've got this great urge for community, but we don't know that that's what it is.
Yes.
In fact, increasingly, I feel like we protect ourselves more and more because we've got this really helpful language around boundaries and introverts, and that is really helpful for self-care, absolutely. But I feel like we now use it more to almost separate ourselves more from each other, possibly. And I think that we need to go, actually, I'm designed this way. I may be an introvert, but I'm also designed to be in community with people. So I need to find healthy ways to really express that and really meet that need that I've got deep within me.
Yes. And like you said, we're trying to fill that space with busyness around like filling the hole with stuff and filling the time by being busy and with technology and all that, but it's not substantive. It's not nourishing. It's like eating candy instead of like a good nutrition filled protein or something. Like it tastes good, and it's okay to eat stuff just because it tastes good sometimes. I'm not villainizing that, but it's also not going to sustain you in like a deep way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We tend to move through our days kind of trying to meet this hunger with all sorts of different things, but the hunger is for connection. So if we can figure out ways of having enough connection with each other and with ourselves, and that's where I think the introvert extrovert stuff comes in. The need at the root of it all is connection, and we have different expressions of where that connection needs to happen according to whether we're sort of introverts or extroverts. So other people need to get that connection need met through other people, and others need to connect deeply with themselves.
Yes.
But it basically, connection is at the heart of everything.
Yeah, the connection can look different from person to person, but there's still that need for connection.
Yeah.
I think it's especially important too when so many of us are living lifestyles that are countercultural. So I know when my oldest was in school for like 2 years, and during that time, I mean, these people, like, this is their community, like, this is their life, like, they are all in, like, these are their friends, this is what they do at their time, this is, and an argument it could certainly be had, and I did in a socialization episode on this podcast about the quality of those connections, but the point remaining, when we fall outside of the mainstream communities, it becomes even more important for us to find people.
Yeah, totally. And that whole it's not easy. You need to because we do have all this other human stuff going on as well, like ego can really be a pain in the butt sometimes. We have ego, and we can be judgmental, and we can be, all these things can kind of like shade our experience of community, but those are actually invitations to move in deeper. And I think what can happen in these communities around like homeschoolers or just alternative communities is that we think, because we've got shared values and these are my tribe, like this should just be really easy, and this person shouldn't annoy me, and this argument shouldn't flare up, so therefore it's not right, so I'm just gonna leave. And
just
you
avoid.
can see people leaving in a huff quite a lot, right? Or people just opt out of the community and don't ever come back into things.
Yeah.
And actually, I would say that arguments or annoyances or harsh words are all kind of invitations to move in deeper to each other. And that's what intimacy really is. It's not just experiencing contentment and, fulfilling conversation. It's actually going, oh, this is really hard, and we need to keep moving into each other, towards each other, in order to move through this. And once you've done that a few times, you've really built intimacy then.
Yes, that discomfort leads to growth piece. When you feel that discomfort, that is the invitation to lean in. That's where the growth happens. And so many people, as soon as they start to feel that something trigger and they feel that discomfort, that's when they back out.
Yeah, that's
and they
exactly
miss out
right.
on the juiciest bit.
Yeah, and that's because we can do that now. Back in the day of ancestrally, when we were indigenous to the land, and we needed each other, and in parishes, like we've needed each other, we've needed our neighbors in order, quite recently, in order to sort of get the hay in, or to do this harvest or whatever. And way back in the day, we needed our community in order to stay alive, in order to fight off beasts of the wild and things like that. Throughout history, we've actually really needed each other. And these days, we still need each other deep down in our bones. But because we kind of live away from each other and we're not dependent on each other in order to actually survive, it's easy to forget that we really need each other.
Yeah, like emotionally we need each other, but practically we don't.
We don't. Yeah, so it's easier to just kind of draw a line under someone and be like, oh, that relationship's not really working for me, or something like that. Oh.
I think another big benefit too is that it connects. Like we've talked on this podcast about the benefits of mixed age play for kids, and this is definitely a benefit of community, but also for adults, like to connect, the elders in your community with the young people and the parents too, that bringing that socialization piece to the adults in a mixed stage way has tremendous benefits. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's so many stories to be shared from our elders and so much wisdom, and we've always been involved in all of the life cycle until very recently.
Yeah.
And now we're removed, like once you come through those baby making years, you kind of then stop having much to do with birth and life, and we definitely don't have very much to do with the other end of life, with old age and death, because we only really migrate towards people that are like us. And I feel like that really takes something away from our human experience, and also our things like our fear around the life cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a million reasons why we would want to build communities that really span all of the ages, but that's a massive one. I think I read recently that basically the fear of death is the fundamental fear of every human. And I think if we were, back in the day in parishes and in tribes, we would have been experiencing, a really kind of healthy and peaceful death a lot of the time. We would have been coming to face with it, and it would have been much less of a fear, I think.
Yes, I mean it's just like with birth. Like my mother recently passed away, and my children were by my side as I cared for her, and we, held her hand through that final transition. And a lot of people were asking, like, how is that going to work? Like, you can't have your kids around for that. And I said, my kids were there for the births of their siblings, and there is so much reflected at both ends, like as I'm now, because this was really my first death that I've like really deeply been a part of, and there was just so much parallel between birth and death, and it felt right in all the same ways to have my children be a part of that as it did for the birth of their siblings.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds like such a precious experience and such a mindful, beautiful way of going about it.
And there's also this, thank you, by the way, there's also the community action piece, which I know, it takes a small group of, what's that quote, of passionate people to change the world. Like, that's what's always changed the world. Yeah. And really through these communities we can leverage impactful community action around issues that we're passionate about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, sorry, do you have more to say about that?
No.
I felt like I just interrupted you.
No, not at all. I've seen you post videos about, with groups of people, and weren't you chaining yourself to something to save a mountain?
Yeah, I've never actually chained myself to something, but the first time I got arrested was I climbed up a drilling rig and just sat on top of it until the police had to kind of take me down. But I didn't have chains that day, but I would have stopped the drilling rig for a little longer if I did have chains. And that's because we've got a local mountain here, which is really beautiful. And to our indigenous people of Aotearoa, it's a really precious mountain. Like, mountains are warriors. They're really vital part of the landscape. And ecologically, it's a very small ecological corridor for birds that are migrating up and down this particular part of New Zealand. So it's really important, both kind of as a sacred mountain, but also ecologically. But there's gold in it, and so for years and years they've been mining it for gold. And then there was kind of a bit of a lull, and then recently, a few years ago, it all started up again. So our community has kind of engaged with that and is trying to stop the mining corporation from digging in there, and that's involved all sorts of different things. Yeah, I've been arrested a couple of times up there now, as have a few other members of the community. One local grandma who did chain herself to the gates to stop the mining vehicles getting in that day. And I really believe that activism is just a supernatural fruit of community. Basically, when we have really strong communities, we do feel really empowered to see something, that might feel massive and insurmountable, such as a big mining company saying this is the richest seam of gold in New Zealand, if not the Southern Hemisphere. That's what they've recently said about our mountain. That might seem really insurmountable, but when you've got like a strong community, you can imagine yourselves taking things on, and you can do things that are so much more beyond the individual members of the group and what they might be capable of. It can be a really sustaining thing. But I do think that our attitude towards activism could do a bit of tweaking as well. I think perhaps we've begun to see activism as really sacrificial and painful and like a war sort of thing, whereas I'm pretty much all about activism as just another way of building community. Both with yourselves, like with your neighbors, but also with the living earth beneath our feet, our greater body. Activism is can just be an expression of that relationship, and it can be really joyful, really playful, and really wholesome, like a really nourishing act. And so I really try and bring that to my activism these days.
Yeah, like
much
less
more than I have in the past.
Like less a violent act of martyrdom and more an ingrained connecting lifestyle.
Yeah, like more just an expression of who I am, or who we are as people that care for the earth or care for each other. It can be a really it can be just a sacred expression of who we are. And I think that's a much more useful way to look at activism as being a really regenerative thing.
And it's a really healthy way, I have found, to channel love. Like at one point for those couple years when my oldest was in school, there was a teacher that told me that I couldn't breastfeed my baby in this parent-teacher conference. And of course, like I definitely engaged some activism around that and sort of called together like a big breastfeeding community around it. And even, sort of every step along the way, it felt less like it wasn't from a place of negativity. It was from a place of love. Like, I'm going to show up for all of the moms who don't have the same privileges I do to show up in this conversation. And I've experienced that so many times around other types of advocacy, as the mother of a trans kid and as, a homeschooler, like legal, fighting for the rights of homeschooling families and things. I mean, the word fight is often associated with activism, and it does take a lot of strength and persistence, but it comes from a place of love and passion and connection with other human beings and with the earth, as opposed to like that stereotype of it coming from a place of anger.
Yeah, totally. And differentiating between sort of kind of an aggressive battle of power, as opposed to it being, an expression of our power, is so important. And I think, and particularly for women, we need to become way more comfortable with our power.
Yes.
And we need to become, saying we need, I'm not here to kind of put more shoulds on women at all, but I really feel like women would really benefit. Lots of women would really benefit and feel really fulfilled were they to step out more in their power, and were they to really feel the fire of passion and the fire of strength and the fire of activism really in their bellies. I think that there's like a whole tribe of women who are designed this way and who don't get very many chances to express themselves this way. And I feel like they're thwarted, they're not living the life that they're meant to be because, I don't know, like they're believing stories about how women should be, or believing stories about what mothers should be like, and
they're staying
instead
small.
they're staying small, and they've lost the stories, they've lost the imperative to stand in power and to really let this fire roar and to be strong and stand out. And when we do all of that, we're really providing some healing for ourselves, we're providing healing for our communities, and I reckon we're providing healing for generations either side of us as well.
Yes to all of that. And we're not, putting more shoulds on women. We are inviting women to sort of ground themselves in all of the generations of women that came before them and to take up more space. And in taking up more space, I find that it is easier to connect with other people. When I succumb to messaging and pressures to keep myself small, that comes along with disconnection. And when I stand in my truth and I speak my truth and I am confident and strong in the things that I'm passionate about, as I take up more space, I touch other people, if that makes sense. Like there's this visual that really holds true for me. Like when I stand up tall and I reach out my arms and I touch other people, and then I get connected with those people, and then communities form around them.
That's exactly right, because you are being exactly who you are. And I honestly just don't think there's much more for us to do in our time on earth than simply just be exactly who we are and bloom where we are meant to bloom. And when we do that, whether that is, an expression of who you are, might be to just live a quiet and a homemaking life. Like absolutely, that is so 100% valid. Those small acts are as important as those great big acts for sure. But I think we've seen we've heard too much that small homemaking woman is the ideal woman, and for some it is the ideal because it's who you are. And then there's a whole bunch of women who they really are the fiery ones, and the ones who are to stand in their power and to make a lot of noise and to tell the truth about things, and we're called to do that. If that is who we are, that's our only job. And you're right, like if everybody was to just be who they are, it would be much easier to form communities.
Yes, to be authentically who you are out loud and with confidence and with peace and openness and in the most authentic, like fully formed whole version. You're like, when you do that, it's like a light and other people are attracted to it.
Yeah, totally. And they're given permission. It's like, I get to be exactly who I am. Awesome.
Yes. So let's talk about how we create these communities. I mean, I know we've talked about like how you can create them around search terms or labels. But what is your take on like how the best way we can create these communities that we are desiring?
I've got a few little maybe tools in the old tool belt. I'm a really big fan of something called a rubbish dinner party. And I think like food is really important, right? But I think particularly like in these days when we've got kids and stuff, I think we can put too much pressure on ourselves around food. So we think, I'm going to have some people over for dinner. What is the menu going to be? And do I have time to make this really delicious lasagna? And I don't really have time. Maybe I won't do it. Maybe I'll do it next month. And, we can kind of just really overthink.
Yeah, my house isn't clean enough. It's not nice enough.
Exactly. Or, is the house tidy enough or whatever? We can put way too much pressure and expectation on it. And so I'm a really big fan of rubbish dinner parties, which is where you basically just send a text around and you say, whatever you are going to eat tonight, eat it at my place. And so people just bring, the meal, the rubbish meal, just pesto pasta, or the most simple meal that they were going to make for their family. They just put it in a pot and bring it over to our place at 6 o'clock or whatever. And we might have 2 families that come, or we might have 7 families that come, and it doesn't matter because it's just a big potluck, food on the table, grab what you want and can, but the thing is really just to eat together and to just spend time with each other. So I'm a really big fan of those, and they can happen within any community. That can be within your unschooling community or your neighborhood. We do them with the people on our street, which we wouldn't necessarily value-wise align ourselves with. They're kind of like rural farmers. They've been, they're not really our people necessarily, but we eat together with them because they are our immediate community, and we also believe that you can build community beyond those like natural values, and as we were talking about the age range and stuff. So yeah, rubbish dinner parties is one way.
That is beautiful and brilliant.
Also just it's simple, it's really simple. And that's the thing about community, I think, is it's just, you don't have to really overthink it. You can just just keep it really simple. We do a lot of things that are just about being together. So one of the things I do with our unschooling community is I'll book a place and just tell unschoolers to just turn up here. We're all going to be here doing our own thing, but together. So here in New Zealand, we're really lucky to have hot pools, and the hot pools are often in campgrounds. So every August, I choose a date at the end of August, so it's the middle of winter. And then I phone the hot pool and I say, do you have any other events happening? And they always say no, or I'll find the date where there's nothing else happening. And then I just make an event on Facebook and I say, hey, all the unschoolers, we're going to be at the hot pools on this date. You can bring a tent or a bus or a caravan, or you can book a cabin or a flat or an apartment, and just come, and we'll just do our own meals because that's easier. And we'll just soak in hot pools for the weekend.
I love it.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, we get like between 15 and 25 families, which is actually a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And it's like zero organization for me. It maybe takes about 5 hours of my life to basically put the wheels in motion for this thing.
Right.
And we do other camps as well. We do run a really amazing off-grid unschooling camp on our land, and we have another spring camp as well. And they do take a lot more hours of organizing, but I guess I tell this story because it's so easy, and it's so, these other camps we do a lot of thinking, and it takes a lot of skill and time to pull them off, but this one is a lot of people's favorite camp. And it is so easy to organize. It literally takes me 5 hours. So yeah, that's a way of doing it, just finding a place and then just getting everyone to just descend to make these little pop-up communities. Yeah. And this year will be the 4th year we've done the hot pool camp, and having 4 days together every 4 years, as well as the other in-between camps, your kids actually do really feel that sense of community with the other people, and that doesn't have to be unschoolers. That could be any kind of, it could be based around any kind of shared value. It could be like an attachment parenting camp, or a writer's camp, or kids who love football camp, or it could really be anything. And actually the motivation for that camp for me wasn't actually community. It was in order to provide a lot of time in the water so that my children could learn to swim, because we moved onto land with a river running through it, and I really felt I'd feel a lot safer if my kids could swim. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity for them to see lots of children at different phases of swimming, so that they could very easily pick up these skills, these swimming skills, without being taught necessarily.
Beautiful.
And it has worked like that. Kids have learned to swim at this camp, but as it's turned out, that's become the very least important part of the camp, as these things often do.
Yes.
So that's another way of kind of forming community, of really getting to know each other. And my most recent book is called Moon Circle, and that's all about how women can foster community with each other. And this is really appeals to the women that have this instinct that says, I was born for more than this. They are the people that still have that wild spirit inside them, and they want to really connect deeply. So we gather around a fire on the new moon, and we will do some rituals, and we will have a sharing circle, and we'll sing a lot of songs, and sometimes we do really kind of strange things, like we do some eye gazing activities, which is really intense, but really amazing and really deepening. Like, it really can deepen your intimacy with someone quite quickly. But they don't have to be that weird. They can just be they can just be really nice as well. But I'm kind of a weird one. I like to take things to like the weird end of things.
Me too. I'm totally in camp weird.
I'm like, is that witchy? I'm into it. I love it. Yeah. So that's another way that I really think. And Tim, my husband, has a fire circle with the men in the community as well. So those are really cool ways that people can very quickly get quite intimate with a group of people. And the nature of these circles is that within the first one, you've kind of you find who is meant to be there, because if they like sitting under the new moon around a fire singing songs, then they'll stay. If they don't, then they won't come back. And it's all good. Yeah, you kind of end up finding your fellow weirdo, witchy friends, so that's quite good. And in our moon circles, we've got elders of our communities, and we've got women who aren't mothers. It's a really diverse group of people within there, and it's just so beautiful. It's like my favorite time of the month, basically, is getting together with the women, and we can really be experimental with people. It might be like so it's the winter equinox. I've got a really strong urge to dive into the river, and we'll be like, okay, we'll join you with that. And it just creates space for people to act on these urges that they might have, but not really normally act on in their kind of everyday sort of mundane lives or something.
I definitely need to get that book.
Yeah. So Moon Circle, it's Moon Circle, and people have found it really helpful for helping them to set up their circles all around the world, which is pretty cool. So those are kind of three little expressions or ways that people can just right now kind of act on community, I guess. But really, it is, I reckon, it's about just being with people and really and sharing those stories and just getting together and moving in towards each other when things feel tricky.
Yeah. I run a group that I call Hack School, which is Homeschool Adventure Club. And once a week we get together. So I organize different activities once a week. And other people, like I just post it as an event it's a Facebook group. I post the event for each week. I usually do them like a season at a time. So I put the whole season's upcoming ones there. And then people show up for these events. And, some of them are experiences that we can't really get on our own, like group tours, and you get discounts for being as a group. Some of them are a lot more organized and there are a lot more details, and then other ones are just like, we're going to be at this beach on this day at this time, like come and join us. And then I've shown up for other people's events too, like we went yurt camping on the Oregon coast, and it was amazing, and it was just a big group of unschoolers where this one mom put it together. And I think that one thing that I have learned from that experience is that one of the key components to getting connected with community is showing up. Like, there are a lot of people who really want this and yearn for this, and they don't show up for it. And it's funny because the showing up, a lot of people would say, oh, that's the easiest part. That's the easiest part. But it's not. That's the bravest part. Like, to actually go out of your comfort zone and step out, from these layers of like what feel like protection and the security blankets that you have, and to show up with these groups of people. So I just want to invite people to really, again, like step into their power and tap into some bravery and show up for yourself in this way, and show up for your kids in this way by showing up to some of these events and to these groups. And I mean, the worst thing that happens is you go and you say, oh my God, what a fun experience we had. And these are not my people, and this is not the right group. It's not a good fit for me, but that's okay. You still have a good experience and you still learn about yourself. And the same goes for your kids.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in some ways, like school has given lots of adults a little bit of a hangover, I think, in terms of cliques and insecurities, oh, nobody likes me here, or everybody here is a bit cool, or something. And we can often bring those really old stories with us when we enter places as adults. And I do like visualization now when I am going into a new group. Because interestingly, I can be a little bit shy sometimes. People don't know that about me. But sometimes it really depends on where I'm at in my menstrual cycle, I think. But sometimes I'm feeling just really shy. And other times I'm feeling like, yay, the universe loves me. It's just a bit of a roller coaster. And, other people might feel that too. But I know in groups, I notice, I can feel the energy of people that have come and are going, oh, I'm not really welcome here, or oh, nobody's going to like me here. I can really feel the energy, and I can empathize with it because I have been that shy person on the edge, at times. And now I just love to do a visualization when I'm going into a new group. And it's just really about taking my ego and putting it down on the ground, and imagining everybody else taking their ego and putting it down on the ground, and basically just imagining us all as big throbbing hearts who pre the Big Bang were an actual item, and now we're all just basically different expressions of love, but we're kind of locked behind ego and all this other stuff. So I just visualize everybody as being that expression of love, and that really helps me. I kind of just like breathe through it, and I'm like, even if I feel maybe not welcome here, or like they're a bit cool or something, I can just remember that behind everything we are just these big throbbing hearts. And I don't know, maybe I got a bit weird then. Is that helpful for anyone?
That is beautiful, and I love it. And I love that your example, because it is so relevant for me right now. I am very confident in like the circles that I have spent years, like the niches that I have spent years, researching and growing into. But there have been 2 examples recently where I showed up to get in connection with a new community or with new people, and both of those times I had a conversation with the person sort of at the head of it, where I said that I was not cool enough to hang out with them. And like made choices aligned with that belief that like, no, I can't go. We're not going to go to the restaurant with you guys after. Like we're not cool enough to hang out like at a restaurant downtown. Like, or, no, I have done that twice. So the second time it happened, like as I walked away from that, I was like, oh, there's the invitation. Like we were talking about earlier. There's an invitation right there. Like I feel uncomfortable, and I recognize that I'm sinking back into a story like that I had written about myself from the past. And I am then behaving in alignment with that story, which is not a fit for who I am today or who I want to be moving forward. So there is an invitation to like lean into that. And the next time someone like this, who was very kind and very warm and very welcoming, next time they invite me, to lean in further, I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say yes to it. And I'm going to lean in. And even if I make a fool of myself, or even if I'm silly, that's okay. Because I'm just going to show up, and like the growth is going to be the goal, not like a specific outcome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we can be so judgmental of ourselves and other people, and we can bring so much stuff into it. One of the most beautiful things, I lead retreats as well. They're called the Dancing for Our Sisterhood retreats. And one of the most beautiful things for me over the last couple of years of running them has been how deeply we can go as communities just over the course of a weekend. And it will be people that you would not really put together. Like, you'd think you could put them together because, you know, they all watch my YouTube channel and, you know, love kind of the same things. But actually, some of them are unschoolers. Some of them are there because they're into kind of off-grid living. And, you know, actually, they're really quite varied groups of people that come together. But through a series of activities such as singing together, and we do this kind of thing on a Friday night, which is really about shedding all of that old stuff that we bring. And really trying to see ourselves as just pure expressions of love. And it's an amazing series of activities. And by the Sunday, it's like we are a family. There is zero judgment. There's been zero judgment all weekend. And there's just pure acceptance of each other. And it's pure love. And I can remember a couple of ones ago, there was one woman who was, you know, she seemed really uncomfortable like the whole time. It was like she was really struggling with these ideas that she shouldn't be there. And about halfway through it, she just said, I can just feel your love for me emanating off your bodies. And she was like, if you told me 2 weeks ago that I would be sitting in a place and feeling love from strangers, I would have said, no way, whatever, you hippie. But I can actually feel it coming from you. And it was really amazing for me because this woman was in every definition like quite a sort of insecure person. And really struggled with self-doubt. And then she was just openly saying, I can feel that you love me. And it was like really powerful because I just thought we do actually love each other. Like we have love for each other underneath everything. We are connected by this really deep and really ancient love. And basically our job is to burrow under all this other human stuff that we can put on relationship and put on ourselves and all these other old stories, and just open ourselves up to feel that love from people, and for me to feel love for them. And it's possible between anyone. And yeah, so that has been a really transformative experience for me over these last couple of years.
That sounds
so
profound.
It's changed everything for me. Like as I move around the world, as I move in my community, I'm just like, I love you, man. In my head, you know, I'm not saying that. But it's like become a very tangible thing for me, this connect, how we are all really deeply connected by this love that's very hard to see some days, you know.
Yeah, you had one of those relatively recently in Oregon, and a friend of mine who loves all the things witchy like me too, she sent it to me and was like, you and I have to go to this. And I wanted to go so badly, but it was when my mom was in the hospital. And so the timing was interesting because I couldn't go because of that experience. And yet because of that experience, I felt this like connection or this like desire to have it even more, you know?
Yeah.
I think that sounds amazing.
The Oregon one was it was so super special. I really hope to be coming through Oregon to do that again one day in the future. Fingers crossed.
My fingers are crossed too. And I mean, you're welcome up here in Washington. You would definitely have a place to stay. I'm just going to throw that out there. You would be welcome in my home.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll have to make it happen.
And at some point, I want to get to New Zealand. So maybe we need to do like a little swap at some point.
Although be there at the same time because you'd be very welcome.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Turns. I guess turns would be like a more accurate language. Okay, so let's talk about how we maintain these communities. What are your best tips? Because I think this is really like the fear that holds a lot of people back, is that they've experienced conflict or they've been burned and they didn't know how to get through it. So what's your best advice for maintaining these communities?
Well, actually, that it can be tricky because it can take a little bit of admin. And I don't know if your community is like this, but me and my community, we're really bad at admin. So I wish that I was better. And how it works really well for me is simply like putting dates in for the next few months and being like, this is when things are going to happen, or to have them. So we have a little community of homeschoolers that we meet every single Wednesday, rain or shine. We build a fire for 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, and the kids play, and you know, we don't really do much. We might have, like, tomorrow we're carving gourds. There might be one activity, but primarily it's a place for the kids to be utterly self-directed, and for the parents to just sit around the campfire and drink tea and talk, and we sing and stuff. So that happens every single Wednesday, which makes it very, very easy. And then the first Wednesday of every month, we have a big, wide open one where we just invite anybody that wants to come. So having kind of regular either dates that are set for the, you know, foreseeable future, or, you know, the first Sunday of every month, or the Friday closest to the new moon. That's our moon cycle. So circles. So just having, like, really
consistency,
easy things, consistent, to make it the admin really simple. Is it really can? I know that's so boring to bring up admin, but it's the truth of it.
I like admin. I am very good at admin, and it brings me an odd sense of joy that it really shouldn't. When I was in college, at one point I worked in the courthouse with the judges and the lawyers, like doing basically all the paperwork, and I loved that job way more than I probably should have.
I need you in my life so much.
I'm very weird.
Come, you can live here. Just live in my little yurt. It's really beautiful. You want to come? So, you know, just the admin thing, and then I would say seeing everything that comes up in your communities as being an invitation to connect more deeply with that person, or connect more deeply with yourself. And I find whenever things come up for me, like conflict or something, it's nearly always about me, and about an opportunity for me to sit down and go, what is the story I'm bringing in here? What are my fears at the bottom of this? And so it's kind of cool. Yeah, I guess we all just I need to get better, and the invitation of community is to get better at not running away and not going, oh, it's not working, or it's too hard, and instead going, what is being asked of me here? What is this situation asking of me here? And we had some conflict quite a few years ago that was really hard, and I was speaking to an old friend, like an elder in our community, and she said, you know, she could see that what had been done to us was wrong, you know, and I was like, but it's just so wrong. And she was like, what these people that do this injustice to you are basically your guides from another place. They're like your spirit guides. And I was like, what the hell? They are so not, you know. And she was like, yeah, they are your guides, like asking you to bring this part of yourself, or to go deeper into this, or to really understand forgiveness. They're here to show you something. They're here to help you grow. And I really rejected it. And then we went out onto her porch to say goodbye, and the person that we were in conflict with drove past. It was so weird, and I was like, oh, that was them. And it just felt kind of like, you know, one of those really fizzy moments that make you go, oh, it really is something in this. And I went away, and I've just thought about it ever since, and it really has turned out to be true. That situation has been like a really deep and really profound journey of forgiveness for us, for Tim and I, and it's been like so beautiful, and one of the most formative things that has happened to us, like since kind of getting married, really. Not the event itself, but where it made us go, the work that we had to do afterwards. So I feel like in terms of maintaining community, it's just like this very strange combination of very practical admin and really hard, deep inner work.
That is so wise.
Yeah, and just things that come up, just seeing them as this like really beautiful invitation to meet this situation and connect and go really deep with it, and knowing that, you know, that allows us to become more of who we are, you know, to be the full fulfillment of who we are here on earth. And like I said before, that's all we're really meant to do. So seeing these opportunities as a chance to carve out more room for who we really are, even though that carving can be really hard.
So when you feel triggered or when you're experiencing conflict, to recognize that that is an invitation to go deeper and to open yourself wider to growth.
Yeah, and to be vulnerable, to go into those really vulnerable, really courageous spaces.
Yeah, I think one part too that I know that you have incorporated into your communities are boundaries. So, what boundaries, and boundaries really are like a boundary is where you clearly communicate your expectations for how you're going to be treated and how others are going to be treated. So, how have boundaries played out in maintaining your communities?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? With boundaries and particularly like communities with children, because we all have such different feelings towards them, and this has been a huge area of growth for our unschooling community. Like when we first came here 5 years ago, there was really just the sense of unschooling means just being who you are and turning up and just being that person and stuff. And so we would go to these unschooling camps, and there would be all sorts of interesting things happen. Like I can remember one of the first ones, some mums came and got me, and they were like, "Oh, all the kids are on the roof of this building, what should we do?" And I went out there and I was like, "What do you feel you should do?" And they were like, "Well, we don't know if they should really be on there." And I was like, well, what are the dangers? And they said, well, it's the roof, so they might actually break the roof. And I was like, so for me, that's really clear. Like, it's not our roof, it's the camp's roof. We're renting this place. So if they're going to break the roof, like by being up there, they shouldn't be up there, eh? And they're like, yeah, no, I guess they kind of shouldn't, So then I said, "Oh, hey kids, looks like you're having fun. It's time to come down now, and let's not go on the roofs again, because this isn't our place. We can't." But the whole thing was really interesting for me, because it was like the parents kind of knew what they should do, but they didn't feel good about doing it because they were a group of loosely affiliated parents with kids, and and so they weren't really able to have a conversation about where their boundaries were. It was like they were really frightened to have that conversation about boundaries. They couldn't do it. And so since that time, the last few years, we've just had so many conversations within that unschooling community around, what are our boundaries? Do we have shared values and shared boundaries that we can use when we come into this place to save heartache and headspace, so that we all know kind of where we stand? So it's been hours and hours of conversation. And now we actually have these giant posters that are laminated, and they go from camp to camp, that have really clear boundaries on them. And they're not hard ones. Like that one is basically we don't harm the property or the wildlife around the camps that we're on. And then the other 3 posters are basically about consent and body boundaries. And we really felt able to do a lot of that work because we thought we would be really serving our community if we articulate really healthy boundaries around consent. And so we did it in a group. It was a collective, and it was really scary because nobody wants to talk about because basically it's about keeping our kids safe from predators and sexual abuse. Nobody wants to talk about that because we don't believe that can happen in our communities. But wherever people are gathered, it can happen. And so we called this meeting to talk about consent and boundaries around our children and safety. And in the very first meeting, somebody said, "I'm so glad that you've called this meeting, because I was actually abused at a homeschooling camp." It was a mum.
Oh, wow.
She said 20 years ago, and that person has still been in our communities, like for the rest of my childhood, and she said, and it was just so affirming. It was like, we do need to do this work. This is really important. If we are going to gather, we actually do need to be the ones who will stand up and do this work on behalf of our children. Just because we're all gathered around a value doesn't necessarily make that a super safe space for everybody.
Right.
So so now at the start of each camp, we introduce the posters and we talk about consent and how you are the boss of your body. Nobody can do anything to your body that you don't want them to do, and how stop is a really important word. And we also have a guideline where if you overhear a child saying stop, you can intervene if you don't hear that stop being honored. Which is quite a hands-on approach for unschoolers, right? I don't know.
No, I love that.
Would be your experience, but we really want to have these very clear boundaries. Even though we are unschoolers, and a lot of people think unschoolers are all about no boundaries, which is totally not true.
No, it's not.
We're about our kids having a safe environment to thrive. So
we are against arbitrary boundaries.
Yeah.
Not meaningful ones.
Things that make no sense. And also boundaries that are maybe just like top down and don't have any resonance or reality for the people in the community. So we've done a lot of boundaries work in our unschooling communities, and when I've shared that before, people have been like, oh, can we have your posters? And I've said, oh, but the point is that you have to do the work. The point really is that you have got to have the conversation. You've got to have these hard conversations.
It's the process, not the product.
So I have done a blog post where I've shared the process and I've shared the posters so people can have food for thought. But it's the hours of discussion that mean that these boundaries aren't arbitrary. They're not put on you from an authority or from like a random blogger living in New Zealand.
No matter how wonderful she is.
They come from the community itself. So again, it's just, I guess, the hard work. But you know what, we all do hard work all the time. It's just that we do the hard work to find the best product on Amazon. I don't know, it's funny, like
it's true.
We should instead do the hard work on things that really matter.
And I think you're going to expend the energy. You are going to spend less energy if you front load it in a proactive way than you will if you expend the energy on the back end, like trying to put out fires and feeling really prickly and things feeling sticky and being in conflict and having all those stories coming up for you. It's so much less energy to collaborate proactively on the front end.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And again, it's a little bit like activism.
Yes.
Instead of seeing it as like, oh, we got to do this hard work to do boundaries, it's like every conversation you have, you're building community. Every time you gather in a room, you can laugh together and play together and become a more authentic version of yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's like seeing it as an invitation, as an opportunity to build the community and feel really good and meet some of those really deep needs that we've got, rather than being like, oh, yawn, boring meeting. Having said that, I don't really like meetings that much. I have to doodle.
Have it around the fire and with food. That makes everything better.
It totally does, and then maybe have like a dance party afterwards and call it a party. Like, just lose the word meeting. Such a bad word.
Yes, I love that. I think too, there's a component that can be helpful of addressing things in the moment. Where for many of us, again, who have had a more mainstream upbringing, we were really taught to like say nothing and to swallow it, but then it just grows inside of us. And so I have found it to be helpful in community to encourage people that if something feels off, to engage in a conversation around it in the moment, because it's much more respectful to yourself and to the other people, to be authentic and open and honest in the moment and talk through things, as opposed to just sort of keeping tallies of all of your resentments as they build, and then kind of dropping a bomb. Like, instead of that, just be open and honest in the moment. Oh, something about what you just said is feeling off for me. Can you, or I have literally said in conversation with someone in a community setting, oh, when you said those words, I had all kinds of stories coming up in my mind about what you meant by that. Could you clarify for me so that I just know straight from you, like, what, tell me more about what you meant by that so I can really hear it. That's
a really beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I love how you describe that and how you make it an invitation to go deeper. With those last two kind of questions. I think that's so beautiful. And yeah, I think it's totally right. And also, you can say, like, a lot of conversations I have with people are about kind of genderizing our children. I don't know if it's like a New Zealand thing, but even within our communities, like, we've got just loads of people who are like, oh, well, boys are like this and girls are like that, and often all I really need to do is just say, oh yeah, I guess I don't really agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes. And it doesn't even have to be a conflict at all. It can just be like, I'm really hearing that you feel that, but I don't feel a need to make you, to persuade you around to my point.
Yes,
I just need to bear witness to my truth, which is that that's interesting that you think that. That's not my experience, at all. And if you want to talk more about that, I'd love to, but I obviously know my job isn't to persuade you, but I don't really agree.
Yes, just log your dissent.
Well. Yeah, it's okay, and you don't have to be prickly. And you can even say, I'm super sorry, this makes this awkward. I've said that before as well, and I've said, I'm sorry, I'm often like the awkward person who's like, oh, excuse me. So you'll have to forgive that part of me, but yeah, I just want to say I don't really agree with that.
I like to think of it and conceptualize it like planting seeds. Like, so I do not have the intention of convincing anybody of anything or trying to manipulate people into changing their perspective on things, but I am always willing to plant seeds. So just like you said, just, if someone's talking about the gendered play of kids, I might just throw down, oh, that's not my experience at all in the research I've done or in my life with my kids. Mine has been really different. I haven't experienced any gendered play in my kids, or, whatever it is that we're talking about. Like, oh, really? That makes you uncomfortable? That doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. I really see it as their right to blah, 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 blah. And like, that's it. And people can take it or leave it. But I mean, the research too is really clear that in terms of, like, I think a lot of research that comes out of bullying, we see that what really makes the difference is the bystander. Like, it's not the victim and it's not the aggressor. They're not the agents of change. It's the bystanders. And so much of that is true in communities where there's a lot of groupthink, and some of it can be really harmful, that it really just takes one person saying, oh, I actually disagree with that. Like, just so you know, I don't, I believe that when people talk that way, it violates someone's rights. So I don't, or, oh, that joke actually wasn't funny. I think that can be really harmful to people to perpetuate that messaging, or and that's it. Like, you can just plant the seed and be done with it. Like, you don't even have to engage in further dialogue. And then in the same token, be open when the other people in the community do that for you. So when they plant a seed, you don't have to argue against it. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to reject it. Just sit on it. Like, just hear it,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love to just go, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's move into our Q&A. So I posted in my Sage Parenting Tribe on Facebook and in the Sage Family Patreon that we were going to chat about creating community today, and asked if anyone had any questions about it. Yana asks, what assumptions and fears did you have about living in community versus what the experience has actually delivered?
Okay, so assumptions and fears. Well, I've always lived in a form of community. Like, since I was 18, I've kind of known deep down that I was born to live in community with people. So when I was 18, I moved into my first shared house with, it was a big 6-bedroom house, and we ran a transitional home for people coming out of prison who were on the street. So young women could come and stay with us for a short period. So that was my very first one. And
That
then
sounds
I got
amazing.
married. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I often look back and I'm like, how the heck did I do that when I was 18 years old? But it was, very formative, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And then a few years later got married, and we had a year of living just as a married couple. And then we immediately began living in community again. And then the kids came along, and we were like, oh, this is hard living in community with children. And so we were like, let's not do it. And we came to New Zealand, and we were absolutely determined that we were just going to buy an acre of land and just have a garden and have a little cottage and just, be normal people. And then while we were looking for land, we ended up on this community, and instead of people living in the same building, it was just shared land where people had their own homes.
Yeah.
And we went, okay, you know what? We could actually do this again, but we will do it, where we own the land and share the work of the land together, and don't share our homes with each other. And so then we began to entertain the idea again, and ended up buying our land with one of those families who were living temporarily on that original bit of land that we were on. And so coming into it this second time round, or actually maybe like the sixth time round, I guess I was a little bit feeling, having those feelings that sharing space again with children might be really hard. But also knowing that I really want to do this for our children, because I feel like being raised with other children around is the most important thing, basically, for kids. And so I was fearful that having kids would make it really complicated, while also had space in my mind to be like, this is one of the main reasons I want to do it. And actually, and both of those things have kind of turned out to be true, in that we have to work through things with our kids an awful lot. So, and we might even go through a month or 2 months where our kids don't really get on. They're just rubbing each other up the wrong way. And we might have to do circles with them, or, me and the other mum might get together and be like, what strategy? We actually do have to put quite a lot of thought into it. Maybe there's been, in 4 years of living together, maybe 8 different times that have felt like, oh, is this working for the kids? And we've had to put a lot of labor into it. So in that sense, that fear kind of has come true. Apart from that, it's been an opportunity to really go deep with the other parents, and also with our children. Like, they have got to experience quite a deep kind of conflict resolution, and have got to experience what it feels like to have to work things out with other people, or to make space for yourself when you don't want to be with the other person. So right. I feel like it has been hard work. It has actually kind of been tricky, but I feel like it's been really, really important, both for me and for the kids, to really go through that. It's actually been really wonderful.
Yeah.
And then the thing that has been absolutely true has been that the kids really, really thrive being so close to other kids. In fact, we would love to have more kids here on the farm.
That sounds like my official invitation. Did everyone hear that?
Yeah, especially if you're going to be the admin person, because yes, please come. I'm going to send you a Google Calendar invite to come and be our admin person.
Perfect.
Because then maybe I can kid you into thinking that I am, a fellow-minded admin person. Yesterday morning, we've got a little wood-fired hot tub in the garden that Tim's just worked on recently, and we'd had a spa the night before, and it was still hot at 8:30 the next morning. So the kids went over and got the other kids, and then they literally just spent 4 hours in the hot tub on this frosty winter morning, just having the best time ever. And it was just such a good example. It's like, when things are going really well with the kids, they are just so, so good. And when they're not going well, it's just an opportunity to kind of go deeper with them and to really help them out with this thing. So I guess like that's a little bit of an example. And because I've done it for most of my adult life. I guess I didn't come into it with maybe some of the normal fears and assumptions that people do have of community. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know they exist out there, but because I've done it for most of my adult life, I guess I don't really have them anymore. Now I'm like, this is how we're meant to live. We really just live like very intentional neighbors. So we do have a 2 to 3 hour meeting every single week, pretty much, if we're all well. And in that meeting, we talk about decisions and things that need to happen, or we might do some work together or go for a walk around the farm together, and that's not normal levels of neighborliness. I do understand you don't have a 3 hour meeting with your neighbors.
I do not.
Apart from that meeting, like, we just try and be like really old school neighbors to each other. Like, we'll run around and get like quarter of a cup of soy sauce, and they'll come to us and grab the gluten-free flour, and we'll send the kids around with like a note to say, do you want to have a campfire tonight? Do you know what I mean? We're just really close neighbors. And apart from that 3 hour meeting, it doesn't always look much different to how we might have lived just 70 or 50 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Like, we haven't been disconnected from each other for very long. It's been very recent that we've done this isolating of ourselves. It's really been just 1 or 2 generations, and before that, for most of history, we have been really deeply embedded in each other's lives. And I guess I just reframe it constantly as that. I'm like, we're just really, really good neighbors.
And that's such a beautiful coming full circle too in this conversation, that, like we talked about, this, our genes are kind of set, their default setting or how we're wired is for this level of connection in community. And so over the last couple of generations, we may have lost the skills to navigate the practical and specific issues, but that is something that you can learn and something that you can work through.
Yeah, you know what though, as well, I think maybe for the last 100, like probably since pre-Victorian years, they didn't have the skills necessarily. Like, can you imagine in the Victorian era, like neighbors getting together and saying, I'm really feeling this expansiveness towards, like, they weren't doing that. They were just like getting their head down and doing what needed to be done to like survive in a community. So now we're actually in this really amazing point in time where we have got these amazing skills in nonviolent communication. We've got resources about how to do that inner work, how to really like build community, like radical intimacy, as well as having like radical boundaries. We've got all this amazing consciousness stuff that we can access and acknowledge that community is really good for us. So like, imagine the magic that can happen when we bring those things together. Pretty amazing, really. Like, I do feel like we're in we're in an incredibly unique place in history, I think, to have those resources available to us.
Revolution is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the way the world is looking at the moment, like with the climate crisis, sorry to bring that in, but it's reality. Like, they are bringing down the years of what we're heading towards, like almost every month. Like, in the last 6 months, it's gone from 12 years to change everything in order to survive, now to 5 years. Just last week, the permafrost were melting. The Arctic is gonna be ice free in the summer, I think, in a couple of years.
Wow.
All of these feedback loops are happening so quickly. We really are heading towards a possible mass extinction.
Yeah.
But what we're going to need so much going forward, it's not going to happen like we're ching, we're all going to be wiped out and it's going to be relief or whatever. It's not going to happen like that. It's going to slowly disintegrate. It's already started to disintegrate. We can see in countries, in India just last week where it was 50 degrees and people were having to literally stand in the river in order to cool down. And there was a massive water crisis and it turned into like localized conflict. We're actually starting to see already the impacts of the climate crisis on our life. And it's going to become more and more and more. And, that's going to be it's going to look like conflict and mass movement of people and migration. And we're really, really going to need each other. We might really need each other in 5 years. We might really need each other in 12 years. It might actually be 70 years before we really need these intense communities in order to survive. But at some point in the future, we're not going to need each other only emotionally again. We're going to need each other really physically again, just as we have for almost all of humankind's, history. We're going to be back in that situation. So, the opportunity now is to really start honing those skills, using all of that consciousness that we've got and bringing it into our community spaces. Because potentially all our world is going to absolutely be turned upside down. I'm 100% confident about that. This current system cannot continue, but that's kind of okay. If we lose military and industrial capitalism and it goes away and we can't consume at this rate, that's actually a good thing. Potentially we might be left like with these really strong, really conscious, really empathetic, non-violent communities of people that know how to be vulnerable, know how to be brave, know how to share resources, know how to share their hearts,
know how to show up for each other.
Exactly. It could be the most amazing shift that it might be something that humankind really, really needs. But I guess what I'm saying is we're not talking abstract anymore, I don't think. I think what we're talking about is really, truly needing each other now, not just emotionally, but physically as well. So let's get really good at it in these few years where we might escape some of that conflict and grief and terror.
Yeah, and if you are a flat earther, climate change denying person, we are actually not trying to plant those seeds like we talked about earlier. We're just telling you to get your shit together and get on board.
Yeah, get on board. We're all in this together. We need each other.
Yes. Okay, let's take our deep dive. The show notes can be found at sageparenting.com/podcast34, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. So, Lucy, what are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic?
Okay, so there's lots of really super great books on being very practical about building community and all that kind of thing. But basically, you can just type community into, Google Books and get all of those and have a browse of them. The ones I really love are the ones that talk about the inner work required to do community. So I highly recommend anything by Brené Brown. She is a hero of mine when it comes to, showing up, being vulnerable, doing this wilderness thing of being with each other. And
Agreed. She's a rock star.
She's an absolute rock star. So I would say get your hands on anything by Brené Brown. She's got, a talk on Netflix at the moment. So if you're a watcher, you can just watch her on Netflix, which is really awesome. I'm also really into Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Zen monk, and I've read a couple of his books because I really like this super simple way that he brings some Buddhist principles into the world. But he's got one called Joyfully Together, the Art of Building a Harmonious Community. And it's just I love the way he writes. He's super simple. And then there's, I really love a lot of Charles Eisenstein's work, who, he's just brought a lot of new philosophical ideas to the world of economics, community, and climate. And his book called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is touches on community living, and you can actually download that one as a PDF for free from his website, as well as getting it on so it's really good. And then there's just kind of like a few classic books about building intentional communities by people who have done it. So like the Fintorn book of community living is one of the most famous kind of intentional kind of communities, and so that's a good one. But those are the ones that I would say, if it's not about being really practical about community living, those are the ones that I would say implore us to do the kind of heart work around living in community that I would super recommend. And it's something that I apply to every single community that I'm a part of, in my family, our neighborhood, and it's Marshall Rosenberg's on nonviolent communication. So you can download that book, Nonviolent Communication, but he's also got, again, if you're a watcher, he's got a whole NVC course on YouTube, like 6 hours. So it's a really amazing resource for you to dig into. Oh, and also my book Moon Circle. If all of that kind of like new moon sisterhood, diving naked together into the river, if all of that appealed to you, you might want to download Moon Circle.
It's definitely going to appeal to our people, our listeners here. And Lulastic and the Hippie Shake, your YouTube channel, your website, you on social media. We're going to link to all of that because y'all definitely want to be friends with Lucy. She's amazing. She's incredible, as you've heard here. And I'm going to link to my Hack School leadership class where I just sort of mapped out how you can go about creating a homeschool adventure club like I run up here in the Pacific Northwest, so you can have one in your own neck of the woods, and you can just apply all of the details and the structure that I created for mine, and that works well for us, and then you can tweak as needed. Lucy, thank you so much for holding the space for this conversation. I know there were so many hiccups along the way with the admin scheduling and you being sick, and people were like, because they kept asking for our episode, and so people kept messaging like me, like, did you record it yet? How was she? And people were like, are you really? It got rescheduled again? I'm like, guys, she's worth it. She's worth it. Just wait. I know she's worth it. And you totally exceeded my expectations. So thank you for being so wonderful.
I'm so sorry. And, that is one of my big flaws. And isn't it beautiful that we can accept each other in all of our strengths and all of our weaknesses?
Yes. I had zero impatience. I fully accept you as you are, Lucy.
I really feel that from you, which is why I once again extend my invitation to come and live in the little yurt and be my admin person. Oh dear. But we'll definitely meet in person one time. It's been a total pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for persevering with me.
Thank you.